Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. Master Bates laughed so vehemently at this magnificent threat that it was some time before Fagin could interpose and represent to Mr. Bolter that he incurred no possible danger in visiting the police office. That is, inasmuch as no account of the little affair in which he had engaged, nor any description of his person, had yet been forwarded to the metropolis. It was very probable that he was not even suspected of having resorted to it for shelter, and that, if he were properly disguised, it would be as safe a spot for him to visit as any in London, inasmuch as it would be, of all places, the very last to which he could be supposed likely to resort of his own free will. Persuaded in part by these representations, but overborne in a much greater degree by his fear of Fagin, Mr. Bolter at length consented, with a very bad grace, to undertake the expedition. By Fagin's directions, he immediately substituted for his own attire a waggoner's frock, velveteen breeches, and leather leggings, all of which articles the Jew had at hand. He was likewise furnished with a felt hat well garnished with turnpike tickets, and a carter's whip. Thus equipped, he was to saunter into the office, as some country fellow from Covent Garden Market might be supposed to do for the gratification of his curiosity, and as he was as awkward, ungainly, and raw-boned a fellow as need be, Mr. Fagin had no fear but that he would look the part to perfection. These arrangements completed, he was informed of the necessary signs and tokens by which to recognize the artful dodger, and was conveyed by Master Bates through dark and winding ways to within a very short distance of Bow Street. Having described the precise situation of the office, and accompanied it with copious directions how he was to walk straight up the passage, and when he got into the side and pull off his hat as he went into the room, Charlie Bates bade him hurry on alone, and promised to bide his return on the spot of their parting. Noah Claypool, or Morris Bolter, as the reader pleases, punctually followed the directions he had received, which, Master Bates, being pretty well acquainted with the locality, were so exact that he was enabled to gain the magisterial presence without asking any question or meeting with any interruption by the way. He found himself jostled among a crowd of people, chiefly women, who were huddled together in a dirty, frowsy room, at the upper end of which was a raised platform railed off from the rest, with a dock for the prisoners on the left hand against the wall, a box for the witnesses in the middle, and a desk for the magistrates on the right, the awful locality last named being screened off by a partition which concealed from the bench from the common gaze, and left the vulgar to imagine if they could, and the full majesty of justice. There were only a couple of women in the dock who were nodding to their admiring friends, while the clerk read some depositions to a couple of policemen, and a man in plain clothes who leaned over the table. A jailer stood reclining against the dock rail, tapping his nose listlessly with a large key, except when he repressed an undue tendency to conversation among the idlers, by proclaiming silence, or looked sternly up to bid some women take that baby out, when the gravity of justice was disturbed by feeble cries, half smothered in the mother's shawl, from some meagre infant. The room smelt close and unwholesome. The walls were dirt-colored and the ceiling blackened. There was an old smoky bust over the mantel-shelf, and a dusty clock above the dock, the only thing present that seemed to go on as it ought for depravity or poverty, or an habitual acquaintance with both, had left a taint on all the inanimate matter, hardly less unpleasant than the thick, greasy scum on every inanimate object that frowned upon it. Noah looked eagerly about him for the dodger, but although there were several women who had done very well for that distinguished character's mother or sister, and more than one man who might be supposed to bear a strong resemblance to his father, nobody at all answering the description given him of Mr. Dawkins was to be seen. He waited in a state of much suspense and uncertainty until the woman, being committed for the trial, went flaunting out, and then was quickly relieved by the appearance of another prisoner, who he felt at once could be no other than the object of his visit. It was indeed Mr. Dawkins, who, shuffling into the office, with the big coat sleeves tucked up as usual, his hand left in his pocket, and his hat in his right hand, proceeded the jailer, with a rolling gait altogether indescribable, and taking his place in the dock, requested in an audible voice to know what he was placed in that disgraceful situation for. "Hold your tongue, will you?" said the jailer. "I'm an Englishman, ain't I?" rejoined the Dodger. "Where are my privileges?" "You'll get your privileges soon enough," retorted the jailer, "and pepper with them." "We'll see what the Secretary of State for the Home Affairs has got to say to the beaks if I don't," replied Mr. Dawkins. "Now then, what is this here business? I shall thank the magistrates to dispose of this here little affair, and not keep me while they read the paper, for I've got an appointment with a gentleman in the city, as I am a man of my word, and very punctual in business matters. He'll go away if I ain't there to my time, and then perhaps there won't be an action for damage against them as they kept me away. Oh, no, certainly not." At this point, the Dodger, with a show of being very particular, with the view to proceedings to be had thereafter, desired the jailer to communicate the names of the two files as was on the bench, which so tickled the spectators that they almost laughed as heartily as Master Bates could have if he had heard the request. "Silence there!" cried the jailer. "What is this?" inquired one of the magistrates. "A pickpocketing case, your worship. Has the boy ever been here before?" "He ought to have been a many times," replied the jailer. "He has been pretty well everywhere else. I know him well, your worship." "Oh, you know me, do you?" cried the artful, making a note of the statement. "Very good. That's a case of defamation of character, anyway." Here there was another laugh and another cry of silence. "Now then, where are the witnesses?" said the clerk. "Ah, that's right," added the Dodger. "Where are they? I should like to see 'em." This wish was immediately gratified, for a policeman stepped forward who had seen the prisoner attempt the pocket of an unknown gentleman in the crowd, and indeed take a handkerchief therefrom, which, being a very old one, he deliberately put back again, after trying in his own countenance. For the reason, he took the Dodger into custody as soon as he could get near him, and the said Dodger, being searched, had upon his person a silver snuff box, with the owner's name engraved upon the lid. This gentleman had been discovered on reference to the court guide, and being then and there present, swore that the snuff box was his, and that he had missed it on the previous day. The moment he had disengaged himself from the crowd before referred to, he had also remarked a young gentleman in the throng, particularly active in making his way about, and that young gentleman was the prisoner before him. "Have you anything to ask this witness, boy?" said the magistrate. "I wouldn't abase myself by descending to hold no conversation with him," replied the Dodger. "Have you anything to say at all?" "Do you hear his worship ask if you have anything to say?" inquired the jailer, nudging the silent Dodger with his elbow. "I beg your pardon," said the Dodger, looking up with an air of abstraction. "Did you redress yourself to me, my man?" "I never see such an out-and-out young vagabond, your worship," observed the officer with a grin. "Do you mean to say anything, you young shaver?" "No," replied the Dodger, "not here, for ain't the shop for justice. Besides which, my attorney is a-breakfasting, this morning, with the vice-president of the House of Commons. But I shall have something elsewhere to say, so will he. So will a very numerous and spectable circle of acquaintance, as will make them beaks wish they'd never been born, or that they'd gotten their footmen to hang 'em up to their own hat pegs, afore they let 'em come out this morning to try it upon me. There, he's fully committed," interposed the clerk. "Take him away." "Come on," said the jailer. I'll come on," replied the Dodger, brushing his hat with the palm of his hand. To the bench. To the bench. To the bench. It's no use your looking frightened. I wouldn't show you no mercy, not a ha'porth of it. You'll pay for this, my fine fellers. I wouldn't be you for something. I wouldn't go free, now, if you was to fall down on your knees and ask me. Here, carry me off to prison. Take me thy way. Take me away. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care and thanks again.